Welcome to Under the Dome, Town Meeting Television's interview series connecting you with your legislators who are working in the Montpelier State House. You can watch this and other Under the Dome programs on Comcast 1087, Burlington Telecom 217, or at youtube.com/townmeetingtv. If you have questions for your legislators, please call in to the program live today, 802-862-3966. My name is Meghan O'Rourke. I work here at CCTV, Town Meeting TV, and today I am joined by Representative Chea Waters Evans from Chittenden 5. Welcome.
Thank you.
Representative Waters Evans of Charlotte is in her second term representing the district and serves as the ranking member on the House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee. Before coming to the State House, she built a career as a writer, a journalist, and a small business owner here in Vermont. You started the Charlotte newspaper, is that right?
I started the Charlotte Bridge.
Yeah.
And I did that for a little over a year, and then I ran for office.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do both at the same time.
Yeah,
but
great.
I loved being a local journalist.
Yeah.
It was so fun.
Great. Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
So you sit on the House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee.
I do.
Please tell the viewers, the scope of this committee's work. What do you oversee?
Yeah, as a real dork, I begged to be on this committee. I might have been the only one when I first got elected. I don't think many people are begging to be on it. But so government operations and military affairs. The military part of it is the National Guard, the Vermont National Guard. We don't get to tell them what to do. Like, we're not commanders of them. It's just over the kind of operational aspect of it. And we recently had an election for an adjutant general. We're the only state left that does that. So we managed that process for the legislature. And
just pause for a second.
yeah.
Because the Adjutant General oversees the National Guard. They're elected. Who are they elected by?
the legislature.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're the only state that still does that. They're appointed in other states.
Yeah, and do they come through the House GovOps to sort of give their...
And there were 2 candidates this year. I mean, there's an election every, I don't know if it's every 2 years. No, it's not 2 years. Maybe every 4 or 6 years. This is the first time that since I've been there that there's been a contested election. So those candidates it was like they were running for office like, any of us do. They were in the State House, shaking hands and meeting people and talking to legislators. It was really interesting.
Yeah, so continue.
It's cool. No, we could get sidetracked a million times.
Exactly,
we might. It's fine. So that's the military affairs portion of what we're doing. And then as far as the government operations, it's kind of a loose, a catch-all for a lot of different things. So we have most of the stuff that the Secretary of State's office does. So the Office of Professional Regulation, they regulate things like professional licenses and things like that. So that's within the Secretary of State's office. We have jurisdiction over that. Elections, suffrage, voting rights. We work a lot with the Secretary of State's office on all of those things. And open meeting law, public records, Cannabis Control Board, all of that stuff comes through our committee. Department of Liquor and Lottery comes through our committee, which includes sports wagering now that we legalized that a couple years ago. Plus we get to do, I just thought of something else that was important. Now it's gone. Wait, liquor and lottery, and it'll come to me in a second. Yeah, so we have lots of, we dip our toes into lots of different departments and jurisdictions.
In my mind, I'm thinking of sort of the triumvirate of House House GovOps is what you call it for short.
Yeah,
right?
GovOps, yeah.
And then Ways and Means, and then appropriations.
Yeah.
I know all the committees are important and everything, everybody's touching everything, but I think of those as sort of power committees in the legislature.
Everybody has their own function. I think this one is particularly relevant recently just because of the elections. And there's a lot of, I hear from a lot of people in it when they're reading national news that they're concerned. And a lot of those things like elections and voting rights and all of that stuff kind of ends up coming through our committee. I just remembered what I was going to tell you.
Tell me.
Which is, it's important. And I get really excited about it, is town charters. Vermont, we have our our charter system. If a town wants different rules or municipality wants different rules, then we allow statewide. They can develop a charter. Many already have a charter, and but it's called a Dillon's Rule state. So the legislature has to approve those charters before municipalities make their own decisions. So after town meeting day, we get charter requests come in.
And you just received one from Burlington, and there are a number from Burlington actually that are sort of held up in the legislature. Do you want to talk about those a little bit specifically? Sure. The ban on guns in the bars, and recently we just passed a new charter change to formalize the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Office as part of our. So some that are more political or more, I don't know, what's difficult.
Yeah.
And then some that are more logistic.
Yes, if we're throwing a pebble in a pond, the rings of some of them are much more widespread than they are with others. I would say, for instance, I think we haven't taken up, we're actually going to hear it tomorrow morning, I think. It's on the schedule. Maybe it's either tomorrow or Thursday. One of the mornings this week, we're going to hear about the new
REIB office.
Yeah, the REIB office that's going to come through. Rep. Mary Catherine Stone, who's from Burlington, is also on GovOps, so she's going to be introducing that one morning this week. And so I'm hoping that one's not controversial. It seems pretty straightforward to me, but you never know. But so the ones like the guns in bars and places that serve alcohol, that's one of the charters where it's like, there's statewide repercussions, right? And it's a lot more politically charged maybe than others were. And those tend to not go very far legislatively because there are broader implications for it, right? And a lot of times those things, like another thing I can think of that comes up on occasion, there are a few charters right now from different municipalities that are about landlord-tenant or just cause eviction and those types of things. And those are also topics that we're trying to address at some point in a larger a larger scope, like statewide.
More comprehensive.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, like, if you have a charter that we say, okay, you know what, Burlington, you can make that rule that you can't have guns where you serve alcohol. It's not like a court decision where it's setting a precedent for other municipalities. You don't automatically get it.
Yeah.
So
another municipality doesn't automatically have to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might be like, why do you let Burlington do that, but not us? Which is then we would have some explaining, I guess, to do. But
and there's some pushback from some municipalities to get rid of Dillon's rule, right? That this form of this legislature overseeing has that come up in the committee at all, or where would that process?
It hasn't come up in committee. I haven't actually seen it, but I know there are a couple folks who have talked about introducing a bill to change it from Dillon's rule, but I guess the irony is that we would have to take that up in our committee to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So
great.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about what your focus has been on, based on your personal interests, but also what you hear from constituents and how you kind of balance that.
Yeah. I am lucky because I have communicative constituents who are kind to me for the most part. I know people get worked up over stuff and they're not always happy with what I'm doing, but I think we have a good dialogue. So that feels great. It feels good. Mostly I hear from people, well, if there's any kind of overwhelming number of emails or phone calls or texts, it's about people's taxes. And that is something, property taxes in particular, and that's something that we are, working on right now, the education reform and trying to manage that.
Yeah. So that's what you're hearing. People's frustrations lie and how much money is coming out of their pocket or how much money is changing.
Yeah.
And how does that, what's the role of House GovOps, and then how do you interact around that in the legislature?
We don't have right now. Those are education committees and Ways and Means and Appropriation. Those are the big money committees where they're deciding Ways and Means is deciding the taxes and how all those formulas work. And that's definitely not my area of expertise. I rely on getting information from them and explaining it to me in terms that are simpler so that I can explain it
Yeah.
to my constituents. But I think constituent-wise, that's always something. I find that people really care about a lot of stuff, right? But it's a triage situation. And if you're struggling to pay to heat your house, or you can't afford health insurance, or your parents are older and they need to go live somewhere and you want them to be well taken care of and you want to be able to afford that, or I have a couple kids in college and one in high school, like when you're thinking about paying for stuff like that, the further removed it is from your household and your immediate life, like the harder. It's not difficult for people to care about it, but I think it's difficult for people to make that a priority when things are a little tougher at home. So, and even though Charlotte has a reputation for being a little fancy, we have there are all kinds of people there, and it's really important that we're making sure that people have somewhere to live, that there's movement in housing, and people can just pay their property taxes and stay where they are and keep good schools. But that's a whole other conversation. I think as far as my previous career was concerned, I'm always a fan of and get spicy during committee talks about open meeting law and public records and things like that. I think it's really important. I just think about I went to an event last week in Montpelier. It's at Press Forward, the local news event, and we watched a little bit of a movie. And I always forget this fact, and then people remind me about it. And someone who was speaking last week reminded me that in communities that have like good, strong local news support, they have lower taxes. They have a higher voter participation. And all these things are directly tied to my committee work, but also directly tied to things that I really care about and like working on and was passionate about when I was a journalist. So,
Yeah. Well,
so it's great to have that connection for me still.
And I did get to sit in on one of the House Government Ops committee hearings where you were hearing from, who's that Tucker Anderson? Tucker, right?
Yes. Our ledge counsel, he is so great. He knows everything.
Open meeting law, and you had a lot to say specifically around the recent changes to the open meeting law, and it was around the hybrid access on the statewide level. So this requirement to provide hybrid access to meetings on the statewide level. And I had the pleasure of getting to sit in on the working group with the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah.
And just talk to me a little bit about, we accomplished so much during COVID in terms of access, in terms of people being able to participate in local government in ways that we would have just wrung our hands for years around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk to me about what's your, what's getting in the way of us doing this on a wider level across our communities.
There is a push and pull, across the state. Like here, in Chittenden County, it's not so bad. But there are areas of the state where it's difficult for a municipality. They might not have reliable broadband. People may not have internet access at their town hall. There are really some small rural towns where putting requirements on them to hold remote meetings might be too difficult. It might be impossible for them to comply with the law. We don't want to stress people out. We don't want to stress out town clerks or select boards or whoever it is. But also, I guess if there was a silver lining to COVID, or at least to that situation, it's that we were able to connect people and find different ways. I mean, in a matter of, I wasn't in the legislature yet, but in a matter of days, they were able to pull together getting 150 to participate online in that. So that would be wonderful if everybody could do it. And we've been talking about a lot about this, even not just in the context of smaller towns, rural towns, places where they don't always have a volunteer to go sit somewhere, to have a public, a physical place for a meeting, and they're also required to have an online thing. But also, we've been talking about
this is the requirement that if you're going to host a meeting on a statewide level, you have to have one person in a location where people can go.
Yes.
physically, just like olden times.
Because if you don't have the internet, you shouldn't be prohibited access to that meeting.
And
Yeah.
you can also join online and you participate seamlessly online as in person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that becomes a hardship. Folks either want to do it all online or only in person. And the hybrid of those is what becomes more complicated.
It does become more complicated. I think, much like voting, I think participation in public meetings and stuff, it not only is it holding people accountable, in government and in decision-making capabilities, but also we want as many people to participate as possible, right? Like we want as many people to be able to go to a meeting as we can get there. The balance comes with not putting too much of a burden on municipalities who might not have hundreds of extra dollars to spend on setting up a Zoom or, paying an employee to stay extra so they can have a physical meeting. So there's a line for some people, and I think, what we've tried to do is make sure that we are not, in our efforts to expand access, that we're actually not putting an undue burden on somebody or on the municipality.
Is there any legislation this year around the open meeting law? I know that the working group presented their findings.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if that's been taken up by
No,
the
we
committees.
had a lot of discussion about public records, but open meeting law, I think we're not going to be seeing anything on that right now. But there's always next year.
Yeah. What else is going on in House GovOps? What other bills are you seeing come through?
So many things.
Yeah.
I mean, so we just had, we left some major things that right at crossover when we voted them out that are now in the Senate. The two big ones that I worked on that I was really passionate about, I worked with two other legislators on, it was H67. It's a government accountability bill that I've worked with Reps Lucy Boyden from Cambridge and Ray Garofano from Essex. And we did it last biennium and it didn't go anywhere. We did it last year. It didn't die because we still had the other year. So we had to do a bunch of amending and do a bunch of work on it. But just trying to and it was based off of years ago, they had a government accountability committee and it kind of floundered, didn't really go anywhere, didn't achieve the goals that they thought it would. So it disbanded, but we've really been trying to get it back. So it's interesting because I think that I don't think there's malicious intent to be like wasteful or to keep kind of perpetuating programs or like parts of our state government or initiatives that aren't working anymore. But I think people just get into these patterns, or we get into the rhythm of just like work life, and maybe sometimes things aren't working that great. Or
Is
they
this
could
related
use an
to
adjustment.
the results-based accountability? Is this the work that happened around the results-based accountability budgeting, or is it?
Like here's our Venn diagram, and that's like here, and then we have the government. We have H67 in the middle here, and then maybe over here we have the auditor's office, and down here there's a chief performance office who's part of the administration. And ideally, this would kind of tie all that work in together.
Got it.
What we were struggling with, the last couple times we tried to get this bill passed was the history of it. First is that people weren't sure it was going to work. It wasn't quite different enough. We had investigatory powers in it at one point, and maybe people weren't excited about that. Wanted to make it nonpartisan, non-controversial, not have people shaking in their boots thinking someone's going to come after them. We weren't thinking, we're going to have a Doge Vermont and we're going to go tear everything apart. That was not the intention at all, and didn't want people to think it was like, settling political scores or anything. So we went back and forth, and then worked with the Joint Fiscal Office too, because they would be doing some of this work for the legislature. And we arrived at this place and we voted it out of committee unanimously, and it was voted out of the House just fine. And now it's over in the Senate, and we're hoping to, so there's the Joint Fiscal Committee, which is made up of the chairs of the money committees, a chair, a vice chair, and some other folks of Ways and Means, appropriations, and then a couple other people from some other committees, and they do a lot of money stuff. And these are people who have deep bench, expertise, lots of experience, like a deep knowledge of the financial aspects and tax policy and the way the money works and all of this stuff. And, maybe we sprung it on a couple people, but also kind of got some permission first to have the Joint Fiscal Committee do this government accountability work. So instead of a government accountability committee on its own, we are tasking them with a government accountability project. So they are going to pick something. They're going to work with JFO.
Can you give us an example of something they would pick?
I'll give you an example of what the Chief Fiscal Officer from the Joint Fiscal Office gave us as an example of what she envisioned this working. They had a project a few years ago where they had they needed some help with some IT projects, and they hired a consultant. This bill for government accountability, it could be a consultant, it could be a full-time employee. It's flexible who they hire for this position. But they had someone come in and look at the way that they were doing their IT projects in that particular office. And this person came up with a system. They were like, okay, so the way you're going about this isn't right. Here, I'm going to make you a graphic of questions to ask. We're going to give you a system that sets you on the right path. And they still use this system like years later. And they ended up hiring that person, having them stay, and now they have someone else doing that job. So the hope is that they could pick a project, maybe not something huge, not like, let's just dive into the Agency of Education and see what they're up to. That's like,
too big.
It's too big, and we don't want to upset anybody. Yeah, that's right. The auditor's there for that. Performance officer is there for the sort of daily life of the statistics and the way those things work. Both departments have really useful information that we will need, but also to say, here's one program, and maybe it's not one that we perceive as failing. Maybe it's just something that we haven't heard much about yet. Because we always have these checkbacks, right, in the legislature. We're like, oh, we'll have a report in 2 years. And we get the reports back, and maybe you read it, maybe you don't. Like, maybe you don't know. And then who does what with that information? So we're hoping that this is like a good springboard for the future when we craft legislation to always have checkbacks in and say, what are we looking for? What would success look like for this program? Yeah. And if you get maybe halfway through and you're like, oh, this isn't working how we thought, why isn't it working how we thought, and how can we adjust to make it work?
Yeah, and this is all, to remind folks, you all are citizen legislators, not professional legislators. You work part-time, 4 days a week. Well, I'm sure you're working more than that, but 4 days a week and only through the months from January to June.
That's right.
Although you must sit on a committee over the summer. You must do some summer committee work.
Many people do. I have not. It might be in my future. We'll see. There are a lot.
Yeah. One of the places, and you touched on this a little bit about the, where there are strong local media systems and where there are not. And while Vermont is, in some ways miles ahead of the rest, in Chittenden County, still we are finding local newsrooms challenged. And I'm curious, we have this new Vermont Journalism Coalition, the Community Vermont Access Network, to be transparent. We are part of the Vermont Access Network that is receiving legislative funding to survive.
Good.
What role do you think the legislature has to play in supporting local journalism or community news and information systems?
I think it's incredibly important that we do so. If we want a healthy democracy, if we want to make sure that we're reaching as many Vermonters as possible with good, accurate, nonpartisan, non-biased information, it's essential that we support local news. We had, I guess it's not going to go anywhere, but I did have a bill last session, so technically it's still active. I think it was H244, and the goal was to try to compel the state of Vermont, when they're spending their advertising money, to spend a percentage of that on local news media.
Yep.
It was didn't go over that great with some people who didn't want to be told how to spend their money, which I understand. And maybe we overshot our percentage. Maybe I think we started at 70%. I know, right?
Yeah.
We had to whittle it down. There are exceptions. Like, you're obviously not going to advertise to a bunch of Vermonters about come to Vermont for tourism in those cases. And like looking for jobs, certain jobs and stuff, you need to advertise outside the state. Yeah. But like health department, they advertise all the time. They have a lot of health campaigns, and we were hoping to support local news that way. That didn't quite work out the way we had hoped. It made it out of the House, but I think perished in the Senate. One good thing that came out of it, though, is that there are some senators and some other representatives who are journalists or were journalists and supportive of that. So we did get some money in the budget for journalism grants and awards to help people out. But I think if we are...
There was a combination of some Vermont Community Foundation funds and the legislative funds through the Secretary of State to provide some grants.
Yeah.
What other initiatives have you heard of that are coming through? Tax credits for journalists.
We talked about
posting
that.
Newspapers of record to include digital newspapers.
Yes, I think the digital aspect is a little tricky for some people. Like in their mind, they're like, we need this in a print newspaper, or it's just not right. But a lot of people get their news. When I started the Charlotte Bridge, it was all online. I know, especially in my community, we still have Charlotte and Heinsberg has the Citizen, where I used to work there as a journalist, and then the Charlotte News. I worked there as a journalist, also as the editor of that paper, and so we're lucky because we have a couple papers where we can get news from, but there are some, there are some communities, their only news available is online, and I think that just counts just as much as if it's a, newsprint in your mailbox. So I think tax credits are tough in Vermont. We don't have, someone was just talking the other day about, I can't remember what state it was, but maybe Illinois, they had $25 million tax credit for, local news and stuff, which is, beyond anything we would ever entertain here. Like, proportionately, that is a lot. Just when I was researching this bill before I started, I was like, let's swing for the fences. We should just sue Google and Meta and Alphabet, and because they're taking this content basically and like using it for free, and they're getting this ad money on their sites, and that's taking ad money from local journalists. But I guess Canada tried to do that and then got in a big fight. I don't think we like to be first about stuff in Vermont, but that might be, we might not have the muscle for that. But the idea of it is really appealing.
Yeah.
But
talk more a little bit.
Maybe not yet.
Talk about that a little bit more. The impact of local, the business model of local news is built on advertising.
Yes.
That's what supports local journalists.
And that was how it went, and it went fine and great until the internet was invented, and then people can spend far less money, and they can get an ad on Instagram or Facebook or something, or TikTok. And unfortunately, my sons are 21, 19, and 15. And I do, even though I talk about this to them all the time, and I think they're pretty well educated, I still have to remind them sometimes. Facebook, they're not really on Facebook, but I'm like, TikTok isn't news.
Yeah.
They're like, but I saw it on the news. Yes.
It's where they're getting information, but it's not necessarily, there isn't your TikTok reporter at your local select board. So I think that's one of the places where...
Wouldn't that be wonderful, though, if we could get someone to do that? If we could just get some young people to just start TikToking about their select board meetings, that would be awesome.
Yeah, well, we do it here, through Town Meeting TV, but it is one of the things that we do in terms of media education. But that's why we're supporting local news initiatives, because that's who's housing journalists who are actually paying attention and helping us figure out what to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Right.
And the advertising aspect of it, if people are not advertising in print and they're saying, whatever my business is, I have X amount of dollars, I want to reach the highest number of people, it's probably at this point not going to be in their local print paper. So I think there are going to have to be some, some innovative ways to aside from suing Meta, which might be a little too much, there have to be some other ways to kind of figure it out and see,
Yeah.
what we can do. And sometimes I think about like back in the day, the Free Press used to have a reporter for every town, right? And I was thinking the other day, how can we get back to some kind of model where we have, maybe it's not a daily print paper or a weekly print paper, but like something along the lines of, 7 Days tries to do that, Digger tries to do that to really cover the whole state, but you're really losing a lot of those, around here it's okay, I think, but other parts of the state, there's some they call it a news desert.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we definitely have some dry spots.
Yeah, and even if, when I look at the archive, we look at the archives here, and by that I mean the media archives, the video archives, and you'll see we pan the audience, so to speak, during a press conference, and the room's packed. Mm-hmm. There are so many journalists. It's 1987. And there's so many journalists there from all over the place. You go now, there's 3 journalists.
Yeah.
You go to a mayor's press conference, 4 people,
Yeah.
5 people. So it really, you can visually see how it's changed, even if those publications are still in effect. They may not be covering as deeply or as widely.
And I don't think it's that people don't want local news and that people don't care about what's happening in their communities. I think it's just, I think it's the opposite. I think people deeply care.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of trying to find a way to financially sustain getting that information to people. I know there are people who are doing things like nonprofit. The Charlotte News, when I worked there, is, a nonprofit that had a board and, operated on donations. And, when I was there, it got a little tricky as far as, how beholden are you to the people who are giving you money if you're trying to be an independent journalist.
Yeah.
And
same with ads.
It's always a balance.
I think we're getting close to time. I'm just curious, what would success look like for you? You went into the beginning of this session in January. Of course, the legislature opens, as we mentioned earlier, and we have just passed crossover. I think crossover date got extended a little bit for some education reform. Is that right?
We had no deadline on the education reform bill because we wanted to make sure it wasn't rushing for that period. That's kind of, we can pick and choose.
And for folks who are curious about that, crossover means when bills leave the House side and go to the Senate and vice versa. So you're picking up the work because a bill has to pass both, as we remember from our days back in the, what's that funny ad? I can't remember the funny.
The Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah.
I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that we have enough time in both chambers. You don't want to just send something over with 3 days left. That would be a mess.
So you went in with some expectations as the ranking member. And what success look like for you by the end of June?
I think as far as our committee is concerned, we got all the bills, I think, that were really important to us, that we were really hoping for. Not only did we get them out of our committee and voted off the House floor, but we had some good. It's always good when you have a nonpartisan vote, when it's, a clear, everyone agrees, it's unanimous. And we had a few of those, which is really important, including one about emergency management, access and stuff, because we have, I can't believe I forgot public safety. We have jurisdiction over public safety and the state police and emergency management and flooding and all of, a lot of those things fall under our jurisdiction too. Yeah. So that was important. It included some language about disability access and giving people information and language access in an emergency and some funding for that, which is really important. We want to make sure everybody can get that information no matter what. Yeah. So that was great.
You had a special pot of funding. Right, that was left over that you got to distribute to some specific projects, right?
Yes, that was through the Vermont State Police and the Department of Public Safety, not State Police. Yes, I think we figured that out. So that was successful. We've got. I had a big thing that we worked on. It was the next steps in animal welfare. We set up that department last biennium. And now we have an animal welfare director, and we got her some direction moving forward so we can take care of some of that. I'm sure you've seen there have been a lot of cases of of some mistreatment of animals and just trying to get a system.
Are we seeing more of those cases because this person's doing this work, or did you set this person because we have seen an uptick in cases that we need to respond to?
We've seen an uptick in cases that we need to respond to, but also when we do see those cases, it's hard to know who's in charge of what.
Yep.
And it's very easy to say, oh, wait, that's not this department, that's this department, because we don't know. There's no clear direction. So we're trying to set that up. So we sent that bill over to the Senate. It's in Senate GovOps. I'm hopeful that it's going to go well. Just introduced it to them maybe last week or the week before. So
great.
Yeah.
And if constituents are watching, they want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
My email is cevans@leg.state.vt.us. They're shortening those.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you can go,
Yeah.
you can type in Vermont legislature into Google and
Yes.
members and find you.
You can go to the Vermont Legislature website, and I think if you Google me, you can probably find my phone number. I put in the
And you can always call the Sergeant at Arms office and
Yeah.
send a message through the page program,
Yeah.
and they'll deliver it to you on paper, which I think
Those
is amazing.
kids are great.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah.
Well, Representative Evans, thank you for joining us
Thank you.
today. I appreciate your words, and thank you for watching. If you want to watch this and other programs, you can stay tuned. And again, you can find us at youtube.com/town meeting television. And we are out.